Hi, we're here interviewing my oldest kid, Remy. And so, for the sake of my class members, can you tell me your name, your pronouns, and where you fall on the LGBTQ plus spectrum? Because that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Remy. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs, and I identify as gender fluid.
Okay. And can you explain what that means?
Gender fluid means that on different days, at different times, I might feel like I'm at a different place on the gender spectrum. So between, if you think of a gender spectrum with like male on one corner, female over here, and then you have like gender queer or like both genders and then agender down here, a person could be anywhere on that map. I might move around on that map day to day. Other people might be somewhere not male or female, but static in one place on that map.
Okay, so some days you might feel like a man.
Mhm.
Some days you feel like a woman.
Mhm.
Identify
Yes.
not feel, identify as a woman. And some days you identify as somewhere in between.
Mhm.
So it like fluid, it
Yes.
changes.
Yes.
Okay. So how old were you when you first realized that you were not straight cisgender?
18.
Okay, and when did you come out?
I was also 18.
Okay, but when you first came out, at that point, did you identify as gender fluid?
No. So it started with my orientation, and I identified as bi. And then somewhere in the middle of my first relationship with a woman, I started feeling less like bi really fit because I thought the kind of relationship that we shared was closer to what I thought relationships should look like than relationships I'd had with men. And so I started using lesbian and more exclusive, just attracted to women. Later on, after that relationship ended, I developed feelings for someone who does not identify totally as a woman and whose body does not look like traditionally you would think of a cis woman. And so I started feeling like lesbian was a little bit too restrictive. It implied too much about who I was attracted to. But I also didn't feel like bi really worked because I didn't feel like I could really be attracted to a cisgendered man. So I just started using queer because that way I just don't tell people that much and they don't make assumptions about who I'm attracted to without me telling them.
Because queer essentially just means that you're not straight cisgender. It could
Right.
be anywhere on the LGBTQ plus spectrum.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so at that point, you identified as queer.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
Yeah, so when I chose queer, that was really just about my orientation. But then later on, last year, so I was about 20, I started thinking that there was also something different with my gender. I wasn't cisgender. And at first I didn't know exactly what that was, but as I thought about it and processed it and shared it with some people and read some things, I eventually arrived at gender fluid, and that's when I changed my name and pronouns.
And you and I have both learned since then that it's quite common for people on the LGBTQ plus spectrum to kind of try on different labels before they figure out which one fits with them.
Yes.
Particularly when they come from a background like yours where it wasn't talked about, so they didn't really have the language to describe what they're experiencing.
Sure. Yeah, and I think if kids came from a more affirming background, they would probably go through the same process. They would just be much younger when they were going through it. And so it would be kind of the same as when a little kid is figuring out their personality and what kind of things they like to do. If they like to read or play sports, they'd also be figuring out what kind of gender and who they're attracted to. And so to an outside observer, it might seem less strange because they're just kids. They're just figuring out who they are. But if you repress that as a kid, then you just kind of go through that same process on a delayed time frame.
Okay. So like those normal kid type behaviors like dressing up and pretending to be different characters and trying out dance and sports and different things and seeing what fits and what sticks. Ideally, you're saying if they had the freedom and the language, then at the same time that they're exploring those different things, they would also be exploring gender identity and sexual attractions to kind of figure out which one.
Right. Trying on different clothes.
Crushes.
And yeah. And the way we describe it as sexual attractions, obviously we're not saying kids should try having sex with different people.
Yeah, as I was saying
but,
that. Yeah.
But when they do start getting to the age where they have crushes, of course everyone knows that the type of person you have a crush on when you're 9 is not necessarily the type of human you might be attracted to later in life. But if they're just trying things out and learning who they like, then they might have crushes on people of different genders, and that might not mean that they're going to grow up to be straight or gay or bi. They're just trying things on.
Right. Or like normal childhood play would be like, what I remember is having Ken and Barbie, and they had babies in the Barbie dream house.
Sure.
And so a more free play, they might have 2 Kens or 2 Barbies, or kind of try out different types of families and couples.
Yeah.
That is kind of what I meant by like that normal childhood play and expression of different things.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to be using an assessment tool, which is kind of a combination of a genogram and an eco map, as I explained earlier, to save time on camera. So to start with, I'm using this graphic of concentric circles to illustrate your kind of typical setup as you are growing up. You have your nuclear family at the center. You're at the very center. You have your nuclear family, your extended family, your close friends, and your church groups and acquaintances. And I kind of converted that to this bar sheet, because what I asked you to do as you're sitting, the nuclear family, when you put this on the table in front of you, the nuclear family is the closest thing. And then as it expands out, it's kind of like, I want you to imagine you're standing in the middle of this circle. And so the ring that's the closest to you is the nuclear family, then extended, then close friends, then acquaintances.
Sure.
And I asked you to take these color-coded Post-it notes and write one Post-it for each person that belongs to these categories, according to your childhood as you were growing up. This was kind of your world. And so just like the cooking shows, in order to save time, we have pre-baked the assessment tool, and this is what it looked like. So you have a Post-it here for each member of your nuclear family, your extended family, your close friends, and your acquaintances. And then what I asked you to do, because I feel like this kind of exercise is helpful for someone with an experience like yours, because as you're through your different coming outs, well, let's go back and let you explain that. What happened with your family, your friends, your communities as you started coming out at different stages? How did that
go? Different people reacted differently. Obviously. The people who are safe and close to me now are not the people who, not always the people who were close before, and also not always the people who were close right after I came out. People kind of have their first reaction and then their later reaction. So some people first react more hostile and then later become more accepting, and some people do the reverse. So it's a long process, and people definitely move around, like on this map. People who are in certain areas, most of them have moved around.
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about. That was kind of the point of this assessment.
Yeah.
But some of the big things that happened to you and I both were that we lost our church, most of our conservative evangelical community. There was a lot of rejection from those people. You weren't really welcome at the church anymore.
Right.
A lot of our family members rejected you, or rejected Nathan when y'all started seeing each other. And so there was a lot of breaking of relationships, of trust, of loved ones that happened. So I have another graphic similar to the first one. It's the concentric circles again. But instead of having nuclear family, here we have in the middle circle is people that you're intimately close with. And then people who you feel safe with, but you're not as close to them. The people that you feel guarded around, like you're friendly, cordial. This might be your coworkers, you're on friendly terms, but you're guarded or hesitant to really talk about everything with them.
Yeah.
And then people who are flat out unsafe. And you're the one who defines what that means for you. And again, I converted it so that if you imagine you're sitting at the middle and this is sitting in front of you, then these are the bands that are going outwards, the ones that are closest to you and the ones that are furthest away. And again, through the magic of television, I had you move all of your Post-its. Take your Post-its from the first one and move them to the second one. And as you can see here, there's a big shift in colors. We also had you add another color for people that are now in your life that weren't in your life growing up. And the new color was green. And some of those green people are now in your most intimate group.
And you'll notice none of them are in the two further out groups because I just don't make new friends who aren't safe anymore.
Well, and you're very fortunate that right now your main communities are school and the campus that you're on is very safe.
Yes.
As you, well, depending on the work environment you have, that could change at some point where someone's part of your everyday life but not safe. It could.
It could.
So, and what I'm going to let you do after we turn the camera off is decorate this how you see fit. You can make the lines bolder. You can move people off the chart if you want. But the main thing that I'm trying to get across is one, that this shifts, and two, that you are the person who has the power to place people in these categories. And that some people may assert themselves and say, well, I have the right to be at your wedding, to walk you down the aisle, to be at your child's birth, to be at your birthday parties because I am insert, you know, because I hold this position. But that ultimately you have the power to decide where someone is in this safety range and where they belong and where they are in your life, whether that's emotionally or physically.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the assessment tool. And thank you for sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you.